The tampon king gets back in the ring. I speak of former VP nominee Tim Walz. He joined Beto O'Rourke at a Texas town hall last night, and the estrogen levels were enough to give Chuck Norris menstrual cramps.
But I think that, but I can't get past the core fact about Walz, which is he presided over, allowed the biggest city in a state to get burned down.
And seemed to not only allow it, but kind of support it, you know?
Did you see the video of his wife saying, I kept the windows open so I could smell the burning rubber from the riots?
I did not see that.
Wow. The wife whose hand he shook.
Oh my God. By the way, I mean, I know it's picking on a little thing, but who the hell shakes their wife's hand?
When Greg Gutfeld and Tucker Carlson team up, it's less a conversation and more political beatdown. This time, their spotlight lands squarely on Governor Tim Walz. And they don't just challenge him, they shred his narrative into confetti. With unfiltered jabs, biting humor, and surgical sarcasm, they expose every crack in his game plan. It's not a debate, it's a takedown in real time. Walz brought talking points. Gutfeld and Carlson brought a wrecking ball.
Politico lingers on candidates' fingers and defend Walz's wide eyes as they claim beards are for bad guys. Tyler, speaking of beards, and I mean the one on your face, not the one that you hang out with.
Let me just say that Walz and every other governor who did anything like that is a monster, and I think on some level he will be punished for it. But no, I admire what you did enough that I hope I'd be man enough to do it myself. I took minor risks during COVID by pointing out things that seemed true to me, but I didn't do anything that heroic. I think it's absolutely essential. Clearly, we're moving toward an authoritarian state. I think we've already arrived. I think your life is a testament to that.
Greg Gutfeld and Tucker Carlson never need an invitation to roast a politician, especially when that politician practically volunteers for public embarrassment. Enter Minnesota Governor Tim Walz, a man who's built his career on pretending to be the adult in the room, while governing like the kid who accidentally locked himself in the liquor cabinet. For Gutfeld and Carlson, this isn't just an opportunity, it's a sport.
Oh, wait, you lost because you weren't woke enough? That's like telling Joy Behar she's not eating enough Doritos. That's like Jasmine Crockett saying, I gotta black this up. That's like Bud Light saying, hey, you know what? We could use more Dylan Mulvaney.
It's as if Walz handed them a piñata with his name on it, blindfolded himself, spun around twice, and dared them to swing. Greg Gutfeld naturally steps up with a swagger guy who's been waiting all week to crack open a fresh six-pack of sarcasm. He doesn't even have to try that hard. Walz makes it easy. Gutfeld paints him not as a governor, but as the proud president of the Bureau of Bland Excuses.
So I'm the law-abiding grandma that was sentenced to 90 days in jail for opening my business during the shutdowns as a peaceful protest when Minnesota Governor Tim Walz unconstitutionally and illegally shut our businesses down. So my question is, if you were in my situation, would you have done the same thing? Or what would you have done?
Well, I flatter myself by imagining I would have done the same thing, because I think what you did is honorable and necessary.
Every policy failure, every botched decision, every headline that reads like satire, Gutfeld packages it all with razor-sharp comedic precision. Walz is practically allergic to accountability, and Gutfeld milks that like a lactose-intolerant cow on an oat milk farm. The roast kicks off with a jab at Walz's grand idea of leadership, locking down an entire state like it's Alcatraz while letting crime ride shotgun through downtown Minneapolis.
Dude, you're an old white guy. And you're right, you are a huge disappointment. I guess hating himself is the first thing he's nailed correctly. Because Walz saying old white men suck isn't a political stance, it's his confession. Walz calling people old and white is like Maxine Waters making fun of someone for shopping at Wigs R Us.
Gutfeld highlights the absurdity of a governor who treats criminals like misunderstood poets and law-abiding citizens like unsupervised toddlers. It's not policy, it's performance art, and the reviews are in 1 star would not recommend. Gutfeld keeps going, dissecting Walz's love for double standards during the pandemic. Walz handled restrictions like a DJ at a rave, turning them up, down, spinning them backward, and remixing them by the hour. He shut down small businesses with the cold efficiency of a mob boss collecting debts, but kept big box stores wide open. Because apparently, viruses know better than to enter a Walmart. Gutfeld doesn't just laugh at the inconsistency. He turns it into a highlight reel of political hypocrisy that hits harder than a late-night monologue after 2 espressos. Then comes education. Gutfeld unloads on Walz's record like a substitute teacher finally snapping. Under Walz, Minnesota classrooms have become more about feelings and facts. Reading scores tanked. Math scores dropped faster than his approval rating. And the only thing multiplied was bureaucracy.
Wait, so Trump is making it more difficult for women to vote? How so? Math problems? But it's further proof that the most dangerous thing for a leftist is a follow-up question, which is why you never hear any. But I guess questioning elections is okay now. But the best moment came when Walz forgot who he is.
Gutfeld mocks the idea that equity had become the new math, where 2 + 2 equals whatever won't hurt anyone's feelings. Walz's education policies, he says, are the academic equivalent of giving every kid a trophy just for showing up to a Zoom call. Then he switches gears to Walz's so-called economic genius, or total lack thereof. Under Walz, Minnesota became a case study in how to turn prosperity into panic, with taxes climbing like cats up a curtain and businesses fleeing like they just smelled smoke. Gutfeld calls it a masterclass in economic repulsion. It's like Walz ran a simulation on how to drive out innovation and mistook the failure screen for success. The state didn't need a governor. It needed an exorcist. By the time Gutfeld is done, Walz looks less like a leader and more like a cautionary tale about how far mediocrity can rise when wrapped in a folksy smile and a press conference. Gutfeld drops punchlines like Ambil's quick, heavy, and unavoidable. But just when you think the roast is over, in comes Tucker Carlson, ready to deliver a second round, more surgical, more intense, and somehow even more hilarious.
Who is Tim Walz exactly?
It started sort of with picking up on just these little lies he would tell. He never was a command sergeant major, despite the fact him, saying that he was. He never attained this rank in the military. Instead, he abandoned his troops and they were deployed to Iraq without him, and he ran for Congress. So I've always felt as a reporter, if someone lies about little things, they're lying about big things.
That's a principle that stands the test of time.
And Minnesota has become, the home of this defund the police movement. It was on the ballot. Minneapolis did not vote to defund the police, but I would say in every way, shape, or form, they defunded the police. You have the Minneapolis Police Department that's lost about 40% of their cops since George Floyd. But instead of being
Minneapolis lost 40% of its cops in 5 years?
Nearly half, yeah.
Tucker Carlson doesn't yell. He doesn't need to. He analyzes a train wreck like a historian reviews a battlefield, calm, methodical, and with that trademark smirk that says he already knows exactly how this ends. When he sets his sights on Tim Walz, it's less about laughs and more about peeling back layer after layer of incompetence, an onion of bad ideas, each layer smellier than the last. Tucker starts with Walz's handling of public safety, or more accurately, public surrender. Under Walz's watch, Minneapolis didn't just defund the police. It practically threw them a going-away party. Carlson highlights how crime didn't just rise. It did a Macarena through the streets. And in response, Walz blinked, shrugged, and handed the mic to community organizers, as if hashtags could stop home invasions. Tucker calls it not just a breakdown of law and order, but an intentional abdication of basic responsibility. Leadership by absence. From there, Tucker zooms in on the pandemic again, but from a different angle. Unlike Gutfeld, who goes for the laughs, Tucker dissects Walz's policies with the calm horror of a man watching someone try to put out a fire with gasoline.
5 years ago this summer, George Floyd, a convicted felon, OD'd on fentanyl outside a convenience store in Minneapolis, and the country changed forever. 5 years later, Tim Walz is still the governor. Keith Ellison is still the attorney general. The cops who were falsely convicted of murdering George Floyd are mostly still in prison. But what happened in Minneapolis itself? Well, it's been wrecked. And no one has said a word about it. But I just wonder about this story in particular. Did he have contact with Walz? Do we know that Walz said, I met this guy ever?
Well, this is what's interesting. We know that he served on a board appointed by Walz. However, I'll say that...
what kind of board was it?
It was a workforce development board.
He details how Walz shut down churches but kept liquor stores open. Because apparently, in Minnesota under Walz, faith was dangerous, but vodka was essential. Tucker points out the creepy, technocratic tone of Walz's press briefings, where citizens were told what to think, what to fear, and when they were allowed to go outside. It wasn't government. It was adult daycare with Orwellian undertones. He paints Walz as a guy who thinks people should ask permission to breathe and submit a form to do it. Every new policy came stamped with fine print that basically read, asterisk, just trust us. Asterisk and Tucker Carlson has never been one to trust bureaucrats armed with clip-on empathy. Then he hits education, and while Gutfeld went for slapstick, Tucker brings a scalpel. He lays out how the Walz administration pushed ideologically driven curricula while actual learning fell off a cliff. To Carlson, it's not just incompetence, it's indoctrination disguised as reform. He mocks the idea that teaching kids to hate their own state history somehow prepares them for real life. It's not education. It's ideological conditioning served lukewarm with a side of mediocrity. To Tucker, Walz represents the worst kind of leadership, bland, smug, and blindly obedient to elite consensus. He's not a leader. He's a hall monitor with a pension. Carlson peels back the Minnesota nice exterior and exposes a soft authoritarian underneath. The one who smiles while signing executive orders that quietly make life harder for the very people he claims to protect. And what makes it all so biting? Carlson isn't shouting, he's chuckling.
Are people misreading Tim's odd greeting? The man of the hour, Tim Walz, brings us our second video of the day, and he's got a very weird way of greeting his wife of 30 years. Roll it.
He's almost baffled that people still take Walz seriously. Every sentence is a scalpel dipped in sarcasm. Every observation lands like a legal brief dressed as a comedy roast. Carlson doesn't destroy Walz by accident. He does it with intent, slowly, thoroughly, hilariously. Together, Gutfeld and Carlson don't just roast Tim Walz. They incinerate the myth of competence he's tried so hard to build. One delivers jokes that cut deeper than policy critiques. The other drops analysis sharper than any debate stage rebuttal. Gutfeld brings a comedy club, Carlson brings a courtroom, and Walz, bless him, brings the endless supply of material. As the dust settles, the laughter fades, and the smirks linger. The message is clear. You can wrap failure in optimism, spin it with press conferences, disguise in sound bites, but you can't survive when two of the sharpest minds in political commentary dig through your greatest hit to disaster. Instead, thanks to Gutfeld and Carlson, Walz will be remembered as the guy who accidentally brought a kazoo to a roast and got barbecued. And just when you think the ashes have cooled, Gutfeld strolls back like a man who realized he forgot to deliver the best punchline.
His wedding anniversary, they were married 5 years after Tiananmen Square, and he picked that date because it was a date that they would remember, he and his wife.
What?
Who does that?
Tiananmen Square?
Correct.
The tank crushing the lone protester? That's
their wedding anniversary. And they went to China for their honeymoon.
Come on. You're sure he picked the anniversary?
They've talked about this in
Tiananmen Square
interviews. Yeah, this is in newspapers.
But Tiananmen Square was a massacre of peaceful protesters.
I know.
Do you think they picked it to, like, in the memory of those brave souls who died opposing the machine?
They haven't said that.
Oh my God!
Tim Walz isn't a one-and-done deal. He's a buffet of blunders that just keeps refilling itself. Gutfeld circles back with that glint in his eye, the kind you see in someone who just realized there's still dessert left in the fridge. He zeroes in on Walz's knack for illusion, how he manages to say everything while meaning absolutely nothing. Gutfeld marvels at the governor's speeches, where words fall like confetti, making a mess without ever forming a clear, honest sentence. And then there's Walz's obsession with following the science, which Gutfeld spins into a full-blown comedy sketch. Not actual science, mind you, but selective science. The kind that fits neatly on a cue card and gets read by someone in a lab coat who moonlights as a yoga instructor. Gutfeld points out how Walz uses that phrase like a magic spell to justify everything from curfews to capacity limits. Because nothing says we care like telling grandma she can't hug her grandkids, but she can stand in line at the DMV for an hour behind a guy sneezing into his shirt. Under Walz, Minnesota turned into the testing ground for every half-baked climate policy handed down by people who think real work is posting pastel infographics on Instagram.
One of them, Politico says, is like Walz's wide eyes showed his passion and emotional intensity. Can we show that? There is his wide eyes. That humans would widen their eyes to convey that danger is close. What emotion are you getting from that?
Sorry. Still. That was every...
Tucker highlights how the governor pushed green energy initiatives that somehow managed to be both expensive and unreliable. Walz talks sustainability, while governing like someone allergic to mirrors. The state's power grid buckled under pressure faster than a spine at a teachers' union meeting. And when the lights went out, figuratively and literally, Walz acted like nature itself had betrayed him. Then Tucker pulls a thread on Walz's cozy relationship with unions. Specifically, how the governor turned government jobs into protected status symbols while the private sector was left gasping like a fish on a sidewalk. Tucker digs deeper, exposing the absurdity of how a 7-Eleven manager/mortuary remains disposal guy ended up on a governor-appointed board in Minnesota. A peek into a system clogged with appointees and cronies who somehow all know each other, but pretend they don't. He unpacks the economic domino effect. How small businesses were thrown under the bus in the name of fairness. Then that bus was driven off a cliff and the wreckage blamed on capitalism. It's not governance. It's improv theater with real-life consequences. Gutfeld jumps back in for one last kick to the ribs, targeting Walz's social media presence, or more accurately, his digital tone deafness. According to Gutfeld, every time Walz posts, it feels like your uncle just discovered Twitter and decided to lip tweet a town hall about paint drying. It's all image, no substance, like a political mannequin program for mild applause. Carlson wraps it all up with a final dose of clarity, laying out the real tragedy. Walz is a man who genuinely believes he's doing good while consistently piloting his state into mediocrity. Not because he's evil, but because he's convinced competence is measured in intentions, not outcomes. And when failure inevitably shows up on the scoreboard, he blames the rules instead of the game plan. In that wreckage, Gutfeld and Carlson leave behind something more powerful than a roast. A reminder that real leadership isn't about looking busy, tweeting slogans, or spinning press conferences. It's about being right when it actually counts.